Bulavanaka. Hello and welcome to our podcast, taking in all things Drua and casting an eye over the Shop and Save Super Rugby Pacific competition that got off to a flying start last weekend. I'm Greg Clark, and while I'll be calling the Swire Shipping Fiji and Drua home games in Fiji, I was glued to the TV last weekend as a fan. I thought it was one of the best starts to a Super Rugby season in some time. And the man who called the game between the Swire Shipping Fiji and Drua and Moana Pasifika at Mount Smart in Auckland joins us this week from Sky Sport in New Zealand. Bulla TJ, Tony Johnson. How are you?
Vanaka, Clarkie, Bulavanaka. Yeah, great, mate. I agree with you. It was an absolutely fabulous way to start the year, and that match was everything that we hoped for.
More on the Drua win shortly, but what about the opening week? What caught your eye?
Well, it got off to a great start, unless you're one of those myopic Crusaders supporters, and that we saw a bit of an upset. I think you have to say that any time the Crusaders get beaten in Christchurch, it is an upset because their home record is so phenomenal. But we saw the Chiefs really flex their muscles. They've got a tremendous amount of depth in that team, so that was a good start. What we saw on Saturday afternoon at Mount Smart really gladdened the heart, and it was beautiful to see, to witness. And then later on, Blues, to me, looking like a team that, having almost got there last year, showing some early credentials. This is from a purely New Zealand perspective. We had a very good game in Australia on Friday night as well. I think the Brumbies are going to be a strong team again this year. And then late on Saturday night, we had the match with the Hurricanes getting off to a really good start, beating the Reds. So to me, what we saw was lots of high-paced action. I love the way this initiative to speed the game up by having less time spent getting to scrums and lineouts immediately having an effect. I think the game on Friday night finished about 2.5 minutes sooner than anticipated by our production staff. So that gives you an idea that is working. So yeah, all in all, I just think across the board, a really great start.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the new experimental laws. I agree with you. And of course, it's only in Super Rugby Pacific, so we've got to try and convince those great men north of the equator to bring them in as well.
Yeah, and that's never easy because I think they regard any initiative coming out of the Southern Hemisphere with great suspicion. Where's this going to benefit, the Southern Hemisphere teams, the All Blacks or Australia, whatever, South Africa maybe. But look, I think what we saw in the Six Nations, particularly when we had a couple of Southern Hemisphere referees in charge, well, they were trying to speed the game up anyway, and they were calling them to the lineouts, they were calling them to the scrums. But in Super Rugby, it's legislated, and I think all of the teams, bar none, have bought into the whole concept of keeping the ball. It's not necessarily meaning the ball's in play more. It creates the sense that the game is being played at more of a tempo, and that's got to be good, both in terms of the spectacle, but also in terms of, I think, the kind of rugby that the teams are trying to play.
And of course, with the Drua, they're always up tempo anyway, so it just suits them more than a couple of the other teams, I guess.
Yeah, it does.
There were some great stories about the Drua in the lead up to the match. What about Peniel at Nakora? So Monday, a development squad member. Wednesday, offered a short-term full contract with the main squad and named on the bench. Thursday, he boards a flight for the very first time. What about the nerves about that? And then on Saturday, game day, and he scores the winning try on debut. That is some story.
Yeah, and what's really pleasing about this is that he's come out of the development program. So this is a guy that obviously they have earmarked for good things, and he showed his composure. It was a breathtaking finish. It was the only time in the game that Drua actually led the match. But yeah, a remarkable moment, quite a backstory there. And there were a lot of them in the team. But it just sort of, I guess, was the icing on the cake of a great afternoon.
Just elaborate a bit, mate. Full time, it was 36-34 to the Drua. A joy to watch. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Never is with the Drua because they chance their arm, they throw it around. But when it comes off, it's an absolute joy to watch and commentate. And give the Moana a plug as well. They engaged as well, didn't they? It must have been a great feeling for you to call that one.
Well, it was a great feeling at the stadium. It wasn't a huge crowd, and hopefully it will grow. And on that note, I'm just so excited to see the Fijian Drua getting 6 games at home in Fiji. I think that's going to be fantastic for the competition. But there was a wonderful atmosphere there. That there was a lot of singing, a lot of dancing, some really good food. That kind of set the tone for the afternoon. And then, of course, to me, I think it was actually quite important for the occasion that Moana Pasifika made a good start. I think if the Fijian Drua had come out of the blocks flying, they might have overwhelmed and we might not have had quite the same contest. So that start was really important. Yes, you're right. Both teams turned the ball over a lot, but that's just the nature of the beast. When you have teams so willing to play with such positive intent, that's going to happen. But that's what Super Rugby Pacific, to me, that's part of what it's supposed to be about. Right from the word go, it was supposed to be about entertaining. I said at the end of the game that this was the missing ingredient from Super Rugby. And there's probably been as much talk in New Zealand about this game as the other games, that were played over the weekend. So that's a great thing. I think people, when they watch these two teams play, it's what they want to see, and they're just going to completely overlook the fact that something might have happened because of a wayward kick or a fumble or a pass that didn't go to the right place, because what they're seeing is just so entertaining.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I was involved in selecting the man of the match, and it came down to 3 in the end. Canterbury, Masi, and Ravu Taumanda. Canterbury got the nod as Hoover player of the match, while Masi was voted the fan favourite. And it's easy for the backs to stand out, but I thought the captain, Tavita Canterbury, was fantastic, leading from the front and scoring a double in the opening game of the season.
Clarkie, I'm almost disappointed, mate. I thought we might have had an argument about this, a debate, but these are the 3 names that I've got written down as well. So, yeah, there you go. So we're on the same page. Yeah, look, to me, Ikaniveri was the spark plug. As the captain, he led very much from the front. And we see hookers scoring from close range all the time. But I'm picking that Levi Aumua, probably about 3 Sunday morning, woke up in a cold sweat as he saw this guy just blasting past him. Yeah, Levi Aumua is a very good player. You don't see him stood up like that very often. That was an astonishing turn of pace from the hooker. And, my old mate, late friend John Drake, used to tell me that front rowers can run as fast as anyone when they need to. And that was a case of that. You're right about, I agree with you about the other 2 as well. Yosefo Masi, what an excellent debut. To me, this guy's just got quality stamped all over his game. We know he's come out of the hallowed space that is the Fijian Sevens team. Was part of the Olympic gold medal squad from Tokyo, but to me, slotted into the 15 game brilliantly. He and Ravovo, that is a very good combination they've got there, a more experienced player. The younger player in Masi, but he has got very good skills, very good instincts. The angle that he ran for that try under the sticks, that showed his class. But I think the other player, and you mentioned him, Celestino, phenomenal game in that this was a classic case of a winger being allowed license to get involved. We saw Formai doing it for Moana Pasifika, to a lesser extent, Tava Nawai, but to me, he was the best winger on the field. A, he showed his pace early on when he was put into space, but B, he was able to get involved, having second and third touches in a movement, just staying with the action, tracking up and support, these sorts of things. I don't know how many touches he had in the game. I would say probably 14 or 15 times he touched the ball in the game. Not always on the outside, sometimes. So I think those 3 definite standouts in the game.
Yeah, Celestino, 130 carries, so, meters, that is. So any winger, outside back, or any player that achieves more than 100 metres in a game has had a pretty handy involvement. Let's go through a few teams. Moana Pasifika, the other new team, they were devastated at the end. They sort of did just about everything to win it, but couldn't hold on in the end. But, I think it was a much better start than last year, obviously.
Well, they had a horror start last year. I think it's fair to say that of all the teams in Super Rugby Pacific in 2022, Moana Pasifika were most affected by COVID. It ravaged through their squad. It disrupted their pre-season. It disrupted their early season. And they were just so slow to get going. They missed out on that, what would have been a glorious opening game against the Blues at Mount Smart Stadium. And I don't think they ever really recovered from that. There's plenty for them to be encouraged by. I think, they weren't at full strength. Sekope Kepu is a player who was missing. Lincoln McClutchley, D'Angelo Lirila, those are a few players that will come back and hopefully strengthen them. I guess what's tough for them is that they now have to turn around and face the Chiefs in Melbourne. And to me, the Chiefs look very strong. The worry has got to be, and I think probably goes for both of these teams, the set piece. They've got to get that right. They've got to make sure that they get their scrum and their line out right, because if you come up against a team like the Crusaders, they sniff any sort of weakness, particularly at scrum time. They are really going to look to bully, to really ram home that advantage. So I think that's the thing it's going to a constant work on. But they introduced some new talent. We know how much pride and how much flair there is in the team. And with a couple of good old stages running the cutter, and Lili Whanau and Sekope Kepu when he comes back, they've got the experience there. But they're going to have to continue to improve. And I think, let's face it, this is still very early on in the story for both of these teams.
You mentioned the Chiefs a couple of times now. They were impressive. The Crusaders, we know in the past they've started slowly and, come on at the end of the competition. Should Scott Robinson be worried?
No, he won't be. It's just not in his nature to worry. He's got a fair bit on his mind at the moment. But to me, it was more a case of the Chiefs going, we're going to stamp an early mark on this competition. The Chiefs have got tremendous depth. And what they got full value out of their really key All Blacks. And I particularly Brodie Retallick. Sam Cane had a very strong game. And Damian McKenzie providing the spark at number 10 that we know he's capable of. And what that meant was that his opposite number, Richie Mo'unga, not operating with front football, no comfort, really wasn't the influence on the game. But look, Sam Whitelock wasn't playing. I think we know how important he is, how influential he is. But they will bounce back from this, I'm quite sure. But it's not the start they were hoping for from the season. But we're a long way from the finish line, and I would never bet against the Crusaders being there when the bells start ringing.
We're looking forward to seeing the Crusaders in Lautoka, of course, taking on the Drua in week 3. You mentioned Damian McKenzie. I see that he's now the leading point scorer of all time for the Chiefs, which is an amazing accomplishment for him. Waratahs and Brumbies, a good game in week 1 as well, because usually these early Aussie derbies are arm wrestles, it could be 10-9, 14-12, etc. But it was entertaining at the new Allianz Stadium in Sydney. The Brumbies have now made it 10 in a row against the Tars. They won at 31-25. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the Waratahs respond. They do play the Drua in Melbourne. They beat the Drua twice last year, so they'll be confident about getting a win in week 2. But, the Brumbies, they just look to me like it was the same old, do the job and get out of there.
I think the key for the Brumbies is what they're able to bring off the bench. I mean, we all know now it's a 23-man game, and sometimes the talent starts getting spread a little bit thinly, and you don't have the quality of players. But, you look at who, I think, was it White came off the bench? I think Darcy Swain bench. When you can bring, proven test players off the bench, it's going to put you in good stead, particularly with the pace that has been set in this competition. I mean, if we're going to continue to see games being played at this clip, boy, it's going to be a real challenge for these teams in terms of their fitness levels. But yeah, look, the early doors, Clarkie, I'd agree that I think the Brumbies, again, look to be the biggest challenge coming out of Australia. I'm hoping for more from the Reds. I guess in many ways, they're my second favourite team, or my favourite Australian team, simply because I've got so much respect for Brad Thorne, but also my old mate and, one often broadcasting partner, Kane Hames, as part of the coaching staff there. So I think they'll get better. But, boy, that was a bit of a setback early on in the season. To lose is one thing. I think the Hurricanes have done it before. I was there one time and they won at Ballymore. But to lose by that sort of margin, to me, that's a bit of a, wow, we've got to get a bit better than that. look, I'm sure they will.
On the Reds, though, they moved their week one clash to Townsville, hoping the North Queensland heat would be too much for the Hurricanes, but it backfired big time because the Canes won 47-13 thanks to an amazing second half. But there were 3 yellow cards, but the 2 yellows for the Reds really hurt them big time. I know that they have problems at lock. They're missing 2, 3, 4 locks. So, and James O'Connor still isn't back. I thought young Liner played well, but it's a long season, and I think O'Connor might slot back into the 10 when he's finally ready. But yeah, it was disappointing for the Reds because they had big hopes, and of course they were the only Australian team to get a Kiwi opponent in week one, and here we go again, the Kiwis 1-0 already.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily setting the tone for what's to come. As I say, I think the Brumbies, you get to Canberra, it's the opposite end of the temperature scale sometimes. Yeah, what I think Jason Holland did, he played it smart with his bench. He changed out his front row at half time. And so what we saw was particularly in Almoa, and I caused a bit of a controversy back here because I had to pick a Form 15 for the week from the New Zealand players. And I actually, in the end, went against my better judgment, and I put Almoa in ahead of Samasoni Taukei'aho. And people in Fiji will remember the phenomenal game that he played when the Chiefs beat the Crusaders on a memorable night in Suva a couple of seasons ago. And that really set alight his career. But I went for Almoa, and also I had Tyrell Lomax on there because they were able to come in at half time against a front row. I think it would have surprised them. It's a front row that was already starting to fatigue, and they had a big impact. To me, Almoa, the reason I gave him the nod, because I think he turned the game around. And so that was just, to me, that was smart coaching. But again, I back to that strength from the bench scenario. And I think this is where the New Zealand teams, and we've got the luxury of this wonderful national provincial championship that we've got to groom the players. And I think that's going to be, that was a deciding factor in the game. It was reasonably even. It was pretty even at half time, wasn't it? But second half, it was pretty one-sided.
Yeah, what about the Blues? You mentioned them. Their performance in Dunedin was unbelievable for week one, hammering the Highlanders 60 points to 20. Gee, they look good, the Blues.
Yeah, tough start for the Highlanders, and maybe they're the New Zealand team that doesn't quite have that strength and depth, and they lose a guy, for example, like Manaki Selby Rickett. He's gone to the Chiefs, makes the Chiefs stronger, definitely weakens the Highlanders. But the Blues, they looked like a team on a mission, didn't they? The Blues brothers were on a mission, and beautifully led, I thought, by Dalton Papali'i. But once they got a roll going, there was nothing that the Highlanders could do about it. Mark Telea is probably one of the talking points of the whole first weekend. There's going to be some real competition for that All Black right wing. Sevu Reece, of course, is probably one of the incumbents, but Telea at the moment is just, he was lights out. Everything he did, he is so hard to stop. And once they got their momentum going, and again, particularly teams can't sort of slow the game down like they used to by taking a water break or having an office meeting before they go to the line out. They've just got to keep going. And once the Blues got a roll going, they were just unstoppable. And so, they look like a team that is hell-bent on going a step further than they did last year.
Yeah, Telea had over 230 run meters, so a fantastic performance for the Blues winger. The All-Aussie affair in Perth, seesawing game, especially in the second half, the Force getting their win 34-27 over the Rebels. 37-year-old former All Black lock Jeremy Thrush coming out of retirement to score the winning try for the Force. What's going to go on next? They'll be calling you and I up to pull the boots again. 37 years of age, from the coaching staff onto the field. No preseason. I think he had his first training run on Monday.
Half your age, Clarkie. No, I don't think they'll ever get that desperate. But yeah, and the thing is, he gives yeoman service, Jeremy Thrush. He was always such a reliable and dependable player. It just shows that he has bought into the whole ethos. They've built something really nice there in Western Australia, and I think it's always going to be a difficult match for anyone going there because there's great energy there. They've assembled a good roster there. but they've got the backing of some really good people, and I always, to me, more strength to their bow. Their survival, their return to Super Rugby can only be a good thing, and that's a good start to the season for them.
Okay, well, we'll rush through, well, not necessarily rush through, but we'll run through week 2. Super Round in Melbourne. You were there last year when all 12 teams, well, not quite, because Moana Pasifika had the problem with COVID and they couldn't put a team on the park. But 12 teams will be in action at AAMI Park. Friday night, Crusaders, Highlanders. You've got to go Crusaders, I guess, judged on the form last week. But the Highlanders, well, hopefully they can hit back and take it to their South Island rivals.
Can you imagine a worse possible scenario to be in if you're the Highlanders and Clark Dermody? You're coming off a thumping loss, and who do you strike? Not just the Crusaders, but a Crusaders team that lost in week 1. I'm sorry, Clarkie, and any Highlanders fans watching, but there's only one way this game's going.
In the Hurricanes, the second game on Friday night, the home team almost got the job done in Perth, but the Hurricanes, if they continue on a roll like they were in the second half in Townsville, it might be one-way traffic in the last 20 or so as well.
Yeah, hopefully the Rebels get some good backing. And last year, I suppose it was a concept in its infant stages. And I really do hope that this weekend can go from strength to strength. I really like the idea. It just has to be in the right place so that you can get a good gathering of fans. And I think this weekend's going to be, a bit of a test of that. Look, the Rebels, we know, they've worked really hard to try and get quality players to Melbourne. But I just think the Hurricanes will see an opportunity here to get 2 wins on the road in Australia to start their season. And again, when you can bring, I mentioned the front rows, you can bring a guy like Duplessis Kirifi off the bench. You've got Ardie Savia, who always plays like a man possessed. You've got quite an enticing mix of bright young things, fearless young players, the likes of Ruben Love in the back line, but also the old stager, the bus, he's still scoring tries. In fact, he's getting very close to becoming the top try scorer in Super Rugby history, Julian Savia. I think he's only got a couple to go there, and he'll have that in his sights as well. So I think if they can kick on, and I'm sure they'll find the temperature a little bit more to their liking. Hard to see the Hurricanes losing, but Rebels at home, I wouldn't write them off. Too much respect for that.
Yeah, talking about Super Round, they're hoping for a crowd of 12 to 15 on Friday night. It's a big week in Melbourne. There's rock concerts, and of course the NRL starts on Thursday night at AAMI Park as well. So quite a bit of opposition around, but hopefully the weather is fine and people get out there and take in some great rugby. Saturday, Moana versus the Chiefs. Well, yeah, Moana finally getting to play a Super Round competition, but the Chiefs too strong for Moana on the back of their great win in Christchurch.
Yeah, I imagine that Clayton McMillan might look to make a few changes. He won't be taking anything for granted. Having scored a win like that against the Crusaders, you don't want to stub your toe the next week, no matter who you're playing. The New Zealand teams, they are operating under some protocols where the All Blacks are not allowed to play mostly 5, in some cases 6 games in a row. He may take an opportunity just to, get a couple of weeks in. I'm really not sure what the plan is there, but I just think at the moment, to me, they look like a very, very strong team. And again, with Mackenzie or whoever he plays at 10, but I think he'll stick with Mackenzie, sparking things. They're a good team to watch. So Moana Pasifika, they are going to have to try and get some sort of parity up front, particularly at the set piece. Otherwise, it could be a tricky sort of an afternoon for them.
The Drua are going for back-to-back wins for the very first time, taking on the Waratahs. The Waratahs winning the 2 games last year. So what's going to be interesting for me is just to see just whether the Drua can get off to a start and take it to the Waratahs, because you cannot be giving an Australian team like the Waratahs with a very experienced pack a lead. You can't chase the scoreboard.
No, they don't want to be doing that for a second week running. They were able to stay in the fight for long enough to give themselves a chance to do what they did at the end with the Rakuru try, which was it was amazing. But you've still got to be in a position to do that. So I think that's got to be their big thing. Look, I liked what I saw from some of their set piece. I think early on they were coming under a bit of pressure at scrum time. If they can sort that out. They've got good line out forwards in there as well, and that is going to be really important for them. And if they're able to get some momentum going in the game, then look out. Boy, what a clash you might see on the wing, particularly if Big Namani turns out. I mean, it's great to see him back playing Super Rugby, isn't it? He's not got any small. Hasn't got any smaller since he's been away.
Just a bit. Sunday in Melbourne, it's the Blues and the Brumbies. This is really going to set the benchmark, isn't it, or the mark for Aussie teams to see how we're going to go in 2023.
Yeah, I'm tempted to say game of the weekend here, Clarkie, because you've got the top Australian prospect, in my mind, and probably at the moment, I'd say, one of the equal favourites from New Zealand coming up against each other. This is going to tell us a fair bit. I suspect that the Brumbies are a very proud team, a fiercely proud entity. I've always had great admiration for them. We think back, and I was talking to Justin Harrison about it last year, those epic battles, particularly around, the early 2000s between the Brumbies and the Crusaders, or the Brumbies and the Blues. They were always, to me, the games to look forward to the most in Super Rugby. So I think, it's a treat to me. This is I think the feature game of the weekend. This is going to tell us a lot. I'd have to say on what we saw last week, just in terms of the expanse with which they're able to play, and it's very much the Super Pacific style that the Blues embrace. That they've got the big guys up front to set the platform, but what they want to do is they want to keep the game moving. The offloads that we all love to see, that we saw so often from the Fijian Drua at the weekend, that sort of rugby. If they're allowed to play like that, then I think they will be too strong for the Brumbies. But when you chuck the feisty likes of Nick White in there, guys like that, they've been around the block. These guys, they know how to disrupt an opposition team, and maybe we get to see how good the Blues are if someone's getting in their face.
And we wrap it all up on Sunday afternoon with the All-Aussie affair, the Force and the Reds. I have been speaking to Phil Blake, the Reds' new defensive coach. He has read the riot act to the squad this week, and rightly so. So I'm expecting them to rebound, but the Force coming off a first-up win, so it could be a good finale.
Yeah, I think it will be, because there's a bit at stake already for these teams. Obviously, the Force want to kick on. The Reds have got to set a few things straight. You're right. Their defence at times, well, it was non-existent. It was just far too much space allowed. And if you allow the New Zealand teams in particular any sort of time and space, then they will absolutely punish you. So they've got to tighten that up. Look, I don't know. Something's telling me the Reds, and I know you'll be happy being a good Queenslander, Clarkie, but to me, it's an intriguing game to come at the end of the weekend, and I really am. I've actually, because I'm not going to Super Weekend this year. It's someone else's turn. Grant Nisbet's going. I went last year. I've got the trip to Asia, which I'm really thrilled about, but I'm just going to sit back and watch the whole thing unfold. Make sure I've got popcorn on display, and just really watch this and enjoy it.
Okay, well, we'll let you go and get prepared for that, even though you've got some time to fill in beforehand. But mate, thank you very much. We really enjoyed the coverage and the commentary last week. The Drua off to a winning start, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Fijian Drua respond after getting a win first up. But it is going to be tough against the Waratahs and the Crusaders in their token next week. But that's what Super Rugby Pacific is all about. There are no easy games. Tony Johnson, always a pleasure, and we'll catch you later in the season.
Well, Clarkie, it was a great thrill for me to have such a wonderful game to start the year off, and to you and to everyone watching Vinaka.
Also joining us on Clarkie's Corner podcast for week 2 is Shane Hussain, who is the head of commercial and marketing for the Swire Shipping Fijian Drua. Buller, Shane, I wanted to chat to you because you were there from day one in Lennox Head. You went right the way through that tough opening season. Now you're in Nandi. I can see you've got an office people around you as well. You've got a headquarters. So tell us the difference between then and now.
Hey, Bullock, Clarkie. The first difference is we're not living out of bags. This season we actually have homes and rooms to go to. Yeah, you're right. Look, it was a tough first year. It was a tough first ask. But if you asked anyone here in the Drew team, they would not have had that. They would not forego that first year experience. We're all the better for it. Yes, wonderful to actually have a home and a home base and an office to come to, and the administration is here, the management is here, the coaches are here, everyone's together. So it's the one Vuvale, one family, right here in Nandi, and this is how we'll be able to deliver 6 home matches for the first time ever, I might add, in the 2023 Shop and Save Super Pacific season.
Yeah, let's talk about the first of those 6 games on Fiji. So all I can see Paul Savia behind you there. He looks like a Caleb Clark lookalike.
He does, although with the Savia surname, he should be with Ardi and Julian, but I think it's just a slightly different body type. He has a slightly different body type for that.
Week 3, Churchill Park, Lautoka. And it is the Fijian Drua taking on Crusaders, the defending champions. Not the first time the Crusaders have played in Fiji, but what an occasion. How's the build-up going?
Oh, it's going really well. It's the talk of the town, Clarkie, with the Crusaders coming here. Before the Draw, the Crusaders were the first team for most Fijians. I mean, I think if you ask the Crusaders, they had the biggest following outside of Christchurch was Suva. So they have a history in Fiji. They've had a history of Fijian players in the team. That's why they have such a large following. And for them to come to Fiji to play Fiji's own team, the Fijian Drua, it's enormously exciting for the players. The preparations are going well. We're doing things, Clarkie. So Lautoka is going to look a little bit different to what you remember from the crack-off game last season against the Chiefs. Gosh, by the way, which people still talk about. And about everything to do with the game, not just the action, obviously on the field, but everything around it. With how engaged the crowd was and how that really put a stamp on the Pacific in the Super Rugby Pacific. So the roof is going to go off at Churchill Park next week for round 3 when the Crusaders, when the Drew play the Crusaders. We are doing a lot of infrastructure improvements and helping the council and the venue owner there do those infrastructure improvements, because this part of the project, this part of what the Drew is, it's about doing things to improve and add capacity and build infrastructure for Fiji, not just on the field or on the playing side, but off the field as well, which is why the Drew is so special to the Fijian people. So Lautoka is going to look very, very different. I can talk specifics if you like, but it's going to be very exciting. The mango tree is still there, and hopefully with some new and stronger branches this time around.
Okay. Tickets. How can fans buy their tickets?
Oh, it's for the first time ever, and I say that with a smile on my face. We have a ticketing platform where fans can buy tickets early, buy tickets just from the convenience of their phones. These things are almost taken for granted everywhere else, but this is new for Fiji. We haven't had a system here where you could do that, and we've worked a lot. We worked very hard in the preseason, in the off season rather, to map stadiums, to set the platform up, to work with banks and the like, to give Fijians and everyone around the world actually a chance to buy tickets from the convenience of their phones or their laptops. And while doing that, we haven't forgone the traditional way that Fijians do purchase tickets, which is in store, paying by cash or paying by other means. That all remains, but we're one of the only teams who probably have such a wide distribution of how fans and supporters can access tickets. We have a big Fijian diaspora, all over the world. And one of the things we are noticing is fans who live in Australia, New Zealand, the US, buying tickets for their families and friends here in Fiji. And that's a very nice touch. That's very, very good. It's the Fijian diaspora looking out for family and friends who live at home. And helping them with ticket purchases, rewarding them, people are giving them as gifts. So it's all happening. It's a lot of action, and not just on the field, but off the field for the draw, like always.
Yeah, and on the field, I know you were at Mount Smart in Auckland, and it must have just given Mick Byrne, the coaching staff, and the full squad, there's so much confidence to hang in there for the 80 minutes, get the win. It was a wonderful story, how the win came about in the end. But Tony Johnson earlier was talking about some teams that had depth, but gee, I tell you what, when you look at some of the players that are still to come back for the Fijian Drua, it looks like you have a well-rounded squad this year.
Oh, 100%. I mean, look, you're absolutely right. The win, just you can't ask for a win, ask for anything better than a win. First up in this competition, it took us until round 3 last year to get our first win. It was very, very good. The boys were absolutely overjoyed. Our socials are full of the team in the changing room doing the awardees, the 4 debutants who got on the park. They got their caps. They just had a wonderful time, and kudos to Moana Pasifika. It was a wonderful game, and Moana are just wonderful hosts, and they invited us to their lounge after the match. The players we had a group session there. There was singing, there's dancing, as there always is when it comes to the Pacific. So the boys enjoyed that. Of course, it took until the 80th minute the win wasn't guaranteed, which was good. Look, a win's a win. We'll take that. The depth you talk about, 100%. We have a number of our players who are just on the verge of making their return to Super Rugby Pacific. Ratumiri Deranalangi, who's our season captain, you called him last year, who played out of his skin. Vileve Miramira is another name, try scorer from last season. He's on his way back. The prop Meli Tuni, Flying Pigeons, prop Masake Nonge, who's a new addition to the squad, is on the road to recovery. So there's a fair few who are in the squad making a return, and then we have obviously a new addition to the squad. Last week, Eroni South, the sledgehammer, he's in town. He's in with the guys and fighting for a place in mix team, either just not this week, at some point in the season.
Yeah, up in Vaitura as well. Didn't play last week, so hopefully, that depth will come through, and you're going to need depth because the games are faster. So, just summing up for this week, you've ticked quite a few boxes already heading into the second season. What are the big challenges ahead now? What's one or two of the big challenges?
Well, look, we're off the field challenges. There's always the issue of weather. Half the Super Rugby season until April, since it's a bit of stormy weather, but this doesn't really faze us Fijians. Rugby's our game. We love it. We work with the venues, with the infrastructure to make sure that they are continuously at the standards required of this competition. And there's obviously is great capacity building for what Fiji needs to be able to host events of international quality and caliber. So those are work on. So we keep working on. We're working on behaviors for fans, advising them of the buying tickets early will save them from queuing up at the gates as the game is about to kick off. Because as you know, the trial game, as you came down here for Clarkie, the match, 20 minutes into the match, people still queuing up to get a ticket, and that's what we do. What we want fans to do is enjoy every bit of the match day experience. That includes the pre-game experience, the activations, and the crowd engagement that happens, the music, and of course you never want to miss, if you're coming to a Fijian Drua home game, the mbole, which we do, which the boys do, is very, very special to us, and it's such a riveting thing for the crowd to witness and be a part of.
Oh, yeah, exciting times ahead. And we look forward to week 3, the Crusaders, the first of 6 games in the regular season. Hopefully there'll be more in the playoffs, but who knows? We'll get to that fence when we have to jump over it. But thanks very much, Shane Hussain from the Fijian Drua, from the marketing team, commercial team, and also thanks to for his input as well. I'm Greg Clark. That's it for week 2. We'll leave it there. We're looking forward to a bumper weekend in Melbourne for the Shop and Save Super Rugby Pacific Super Round. Go the Fijian Drua. Bye for now. Mobe.